Hey, Amy, are you all good to go there?
I think so. Me and John are just kind of finishing it up here. I just changed host status back to Brittany.
Okay, I will get Brittany to give it back to me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hey Renee, is it okay if I leave you co-host?
Sure. Yeah, if that's what you want to do. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Right now it's 2 o'clock. So calling the meeting to order for February 7th. I'm hearing an echo. Oh, I'll log into the Zoom so those at home can see me, but I'm calling the meeting to order. Assume, who doesn't have their thing muted? Is that you, Tamara? Okay, working on it. Are Sheena and Shelley online? Okay, so we have 100% attendance with 2 virtual and the rest in chambers. The agenda isn't changing, but council, I want to switch the 12.1 and 12.2, which are in-camera conversations, simply because there could potentially be a public motion after 12.2, and if we do that one first, then our ledge officers can go home. That's the only reason. So if everyone's okay with that amendment, I will look to Councillor Mackay to make a motion.
That the February 7th, 2022 agenda be adopted as presented?
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you. Call for the vote. Pardon? Councillor Bermansky, we're waiting for your vote on the agenda. There, that motion passes unanimously. Perfect. There are no registered delegations or presentations to be made, so we're going to skip over 3 and 4. The consent agenda has 2 things on it, and I haven't heard any motion to remove it, so can I have Councillor Jolly go ahead?
That the recommendations in the following agenda reports be approved. 6.1, time extension request, stormwater revised rate model implementation, and 7.1, bylaw 2, 2022, land use bylaw 205, amendment, first reading.
Awesome, thank you. Call for the vote. Voting is closed, and that passes unanimously. Awesome. Okay. Moving on. So the first thing on our agenda was also on consent, was a time extension. So the motion read as followed, that a deadline extension for the following item be approved. It is the stormwater revised rate model implementation. We were supposed to have a workshop, so we've extended that to Q1 of 2023, and that the actual implementation of a stormwater revised rate model be postponed until a future date as determined by council. So we're postponing that. So this is Q1 2023 workshop. Awesome. All right. The next thing on our agenda is the solar farm update. We have Regan with us today to do the presentation. Then we'll have questions, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Killett, to put your revised motion on the floor for debate. So we'll start with you, Regan. Go ahead.
All right. Give me a second here. Can everyone see my screen?
We sure can.
Okay. So this is a bit of an update on the solar farm. Just hang on a second. Okay, something's not working here. Bear with me a minute.
Right now we see your slide number 2.
Right. Okay. Yeah, my notes aren't coming up now. Now they are. Okay. So we're not seeking or expecting a final decision on the solar farm today. We just reached a critical stage on the design that will affect the information that we'll have available at the decision making in the future. The approved charter for the project, as well as ATCO's financial feasibility assessment and the 30% design, were all based on an assumption for a commercial solar farm. And that's what we're calling option 1 in this presentation here today. We've also been learning more about the municipal own use generation, which we're calling option 2. We'd like to do some due diligence on this option, as well as an option for a hybrid solar farm, or option 3. what we're looking for is actually, it's the best design option at this stage that'll help us determine what the expected costs, revenue, and benefits will be for all three of these options. So I'll just go over the commercial solar farm. So at the 30% design, we had incorporated Fowler Way. Just to give you an awareness, Villeneuve Road realignment is not included in this. The expectation is that Villeneuve Road will not be realigned until the site is actually developed for urban development. So that'll be post solar farm. The solar farm is intended to be a temporary use of the land. The rated DC size of the solar farm is 15.1 megawatts DC, and the AC size is 14.4 megawatts AC. The projected first full year of production is 20,393 megawatt hours, which is equivalent to about 2,832 homes, with each home consuming 600 kilowatt hours per month or 7.2 megawatt hours per year. One of the compliance issues, there's some different rules based on, and different solar facilities have different rules based on their size. Rooftop solar is treated differently than micro generation, which is less than 5 megawatts in size. At the solar farm that we're talking about is a utility scale generation facility, which is larger than 5 megawatts. And there's a number of different rules that come into play, including compliance with the Electric Utilities Act. And there's a stipulation in here that a municipally owned generating unit, including those owned by a corporation controlled by the municipality, must be structured in a manner that prevents any tax advantage, subsidy, or financing advantage, or any other indirect benefit as a result of association with the municipality or subsidiary. So what they're saying is they want a level playing field, right? A private generation facility would pay municipal taxes. And I'll just provide some of the examples of ways that we could subsidize, or some of the subsidies that they could receive. Like if we were not to charge a lease payment, basically provide free use of the land, that would be considered a subsidy. No municipal taxes for the solar farm would be considered a subsidy. If we didn't charge for municipal administration over and above O&M, like our legal costs, some of our finance costs, and I'm talking administration here. Offsite levies, which we're all aware is a big one for this project. And then debt financing. If we were to use the City of St. Albert preferred debt rate, which has historically been 1% lower than the market debt rate, that would be considered a subsidy as well. These weren't included in the ATCO Boost preliminary financial feasibility assessment. However, we did include them in our own cost benefit analysis when we presented this to Council in August of 2022. And it is planned to include the above costs in the financial analysis during phase 3. I should also mention that with the wind down of the Alberta Capital Finance Authority, the financing costs for municipalities are now, with Alberta Treasuries, expected to be at market rates and about 1% higher than they were in the past. So we're expecting the financing costs for this project, and actually all projects undertaken by municipalities across Alberta, are going to be higher going forward. But in relation to this project, it's going to affect our project costs by increasing the financing costs. So. There's another regulation called the Payment in Lieu of Tax Regulation, and it defines the terms of a balancing pool payment that must be made to the Alberta Electric System Operator based on the net income of the generation entity. So this is specific to municipalities. Because we're exempt from paying provincial and federal taxes, there is this special regulation that removes that exemption for a generation entity of this size. So ATCO Boost did include a BPP equivalent to the provincial and federal taxes that would be owing on the commercial solar farm. And that was based on the net revenue of the project, based on their analysis. The legislation does not clearly state that a municipally controlled corporation is a requirement for a commercial solar farm. However, given these two requirements, the first requirement being that we must demonstrate that we're not subsidizing a commercial solar farm, and the second requirement is that we need to calculate the taxes payable for a commercial solar farm. Both of these would require separate accounting, and it is expected that a separate legal entity would therefore be required for a commercial solar farm, which would be owned by the City of St. Albert. This legal entity would likely take the form of a municipal energy corporation or an MEC. And an MEC, I should mention that an MEC for a commercial solar farm only is expected to be less cumbersome than the larger scale MEC that has previously been presented to council. We do not expect that a dedicated board is required, nor do we expect that dedicated employees are required. If we're just looking at a solar farm only, the big decision is sort of the go/no decision that you're well aware of whether to go ahead. After that, there's going to be some finance and administration, and there's not a lot of big decisions that are made once the solar farm is actually constructed. It's selling the electricity and then doing the accounting on that exercise. So. Another thing that I just wanted to make everyone aware is grants. ATCO and Boost did not include an allowance for grants in their financial feasibility assessment, but they noted that would be part of phase 3. We assumed 10% for grants based on what we were seeing that was available on the initial capital costs only in our cost benefit analysis in August. We've since been researching several grant programs, and our PM's actually in the process of applying for a grant that we expect will offset some of the engineering costs for the project. It is possible that our total grant eligibility might actually be higher than 10%. And some of the early feedback is that our eligibility would be better if the application included more innovation. And of the 3 options that have been discussed, the hybrid solar farm, or option 3, actually appears to be the most innovative. So I'll talk a little bit about municipal owned use generation. So there's actually a special piece of legislation that provides some special exemptions for municipalities under the Electric Utilities Act. With municipal owned use generation, instead of selling the electricity to the power pool or through a PPA, the electricity is used to offset consumption at our own municipal facilities. There's no balancing pool payment, and there's no requirement for us to demonstrate that there's no subsidization. There's also no need for an MEC for the separate accounting. However, 100% of the electricity generated must be consumed at municipally owned or leased facilities during every settlement period. And there's only 5 MOUG generation facilities in Alberta, and EPCOR's EL Smith Solar Farm is expected to become the 6th. So there's some administration. I'll talk some of the challenges with MOUG. You have to prepare a compliance plan, and that goes to the Market Surveillance Administrator. And you have to demonstrate that 100% of the electricity that's being produced is also being consumed. And what that means is, solar farm is limited because it only produces electricity during daylight hours, and it produces most of that electricity during the summer months. The peak electricity is in the summer months, with much less in the winter months. And this current settlement period is hourly. And there's also the possibility that may shift to 15-minute settlement intervals. We expect that the first year of production, as I said earlier, was 20,393 megawatt hours is what it's expected to be. And then it'll decline with degradation of the solar panels a little bit each year. Currently, the city of St. Albert consumes about 18,900 megawatt hours of electricity from the grid at all of our facilities and sites. And the top 5 of those are Service Place, St. Albert Place, Fountain Park Pool, the Oakmont Reservoir, and Jerome McGinley Kinex Arena. So that's about the equivalent of 26-25 homes. But the time of use obviously does not line up. At least 2,600 megawatt hours of our consumption is for street lighting, which we can't use to offset the solar farm production because of the time of use. As well, our existing rooftop solar production, as well as the Service Place the rooftop solar that's going in at Service Place, it'll coincide with the municipal owned use solar farm production, and that'll further reduce our ability to offset our production with consumption. So our initial estimate is that an MOUG solar farm would need to be about 1/3 the size of the project that's currently approved. And another thing that we just want to make everyone aware of, the environmental attributes we're not clear on. The legislation is pretty strict on how we deal with the revenue from electricity generation. It's not clear whether we can sell the environmental attributes and still make revenue on that. All that the municipal owned use regulation is clear on is that the electricity must be consumed at our municipal facilities. So this is something that we need to investigate further. The hybrid solar farm, as I said before, it's a combination, 2/3 commercial solar farm and 1/3 municipal owned use generation solar farm. It's expected to have the same economies of scale as the commercial solar farm, and it's expected to have the same tax advantages as the municipal owned use solar farm, just for that 1/3 portion. It's not clear yet whether Fortis will treat this as 1 or 2 interconnections, and that's part of the reason that we're favoring the hybrid solar option is so that we can find out whether this would increase the project cost by about $800,000. Each interconnection, we expect to cost $800,000 with Fortis. So whether they would treat this as 1 or 2 interconnections, we're viewing it as a single interconnection with 2 meters. But that's the reason that we want to go down the path with the design and then with the application with Fortis to prove that out. So what we expect it would look like, what ATCO's recommendation is that the south array would be municipal own use generation. So that's the piece that's south of Fowler Way. And the two arrays that are north of Fowler Way would be commercial solar farm. This isn't locking us completely in. I mean, we expect we'll be able to change to municipal own use generation at a later design stage by eliminating the commercial solar farm portion. It's much easier to remove things that have been designed from the project than it is to add scope to the project at a later date. So we favor hybrid solar farm over municipal own use generation for design at this time. We can also switch to the commercial solar farm at a later design stage by simplifying that interconnection to Fortis. Another thing that I mentioned, we could potentially phase this with the municipal own use generation first and the commercial solar farm later. However, this would add additional cost to the project because we expect that Fortis would definitely treat that as two separate interconnections. So next steps that we're looking at is environmental regulatory studies. Those need to be completed for the AUC application, and ATCO will complete their 60% design. The phase 2 and 3 application will be submitted to Fortis, and we expect the phase 3 90% technical memorandum will be presented to council in July of 2022. And the financial analysis as part of this, we're still planning to cover all the options, the commercial solar farm, municipal own use generation solar farm, and the hybrid solar farm, as well as other options like a lease to a third party with possible partners, develop the site as urban residential, develop the site as urban commercial, and develop the site as urban residential, or urban industrial, sorry. So there's lots of options that we're going to be looking. What we're trying to achieve here is just choose a design that'll give us the answers that we need for all the options. And we feel that the hybrid is the best one for that purpose. So I guess, did anyone have any questions?
I'm sure there will be. Ken's already got his hand up. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just a great presentation. Thanks for clarifying some of my initial questions that I had when reading the backgrounder. And so can you, when we were going through some of the limitations that were there under the Electrical Utilities Act, were we aware of this limitation? Was our ATCO and Boost, did they provide that information to us during their first presentation, or is this entirely new?
We were aware of some of the limitations, but not all of them. ATCO took a look at our existing usage historically, and they thought that the number was about the same. Well, it was about the same size, right? But since that time, we've actually, the rooftop solar has been added at Transit as well as at Jack Craft, which has reduced our overall consumption. But ATCO was not aware of that the time of use needed to match on an hourly basis, which has a big impact. So that was something that we were made aware of when we met with the MSA.
So then, just building on that, our current facilities that are like Jack Craft and the other and service, were not impacted by this limitation. Then, correct?
They're not impacted by this limitation. No, rooftop solar is treated differently. This is because of the size, because the solar farm is expected to be larger than 5 megawatts. There's different rules apply under the Electric Utilities Act, and this MOUG regulation is another exemption that we can use for a facility of this size, for a generation facility of this size. So, rooftop solar is treated differently.
Thanks. I appreciate the clarification. And I thought that's what I heard. So in relation, when you come back with all of the different analysis, will that also include the other piece that I was looking at, which is the remediation cost for the Badger land? Is that factored into the financial analysis, or is that separate? Because it was a separate motion arising out of the 30th of August.
So the remediation study, well, is being done in parallel with this process, and that's being done by our environment group. The financial impact of that remediation study will be included as part of this, because that's looking at the options for the other uses of the site, whether residential, commercial, or industrial development. Those remediation costs are going to factor into our costs to develop the site for urban development, which are alternatives for the site that would exclude a solar farm. So we want to look at all potential uses for the site in our final financial analysis that we'll present in July.
So by recommending option 3, you're just saying that's just, you're looking at your best design. You're not going to limit anything else. You're not going to close off anything else. You're still going to provide us with everything that we were looking for in phase 3, plus what we're looking at maybe potentially getting a partner or looking at totally moving away and looking at other uses for the land. That's all still going to come forward. If we move to a 1 or 2, what do we not get that still, or we just limit administration just to those 2 options or other options?
So if we were to choose municipal own use generation, we would obviously have a scaled down design, and that would result in some of that design work being deferred to a later date, right? And it'll be at a timeline where it'll be at a critical stage. Like as I said earlier, it's much easier to delete some of the design than it is to add additional elements to the project, add additional scope in. So what the project as approved was a utility scale solar farm. Basically, we don't want to ride 3 horses, and so we're trying to choose the horse in the middle, because we can delete the commercial portion and we can convert this over to municipal own use generation if that's the decision that is made in July, or we can go the full commercial farm, and we can commercial solar farm. We can simplify that interconnection with Fortis at a later stage as well. But if we were to go the commercial solar farm right now, we wouldn't be able to ask those questions about municipal own use generation. And Fortis needs us to apply. It's a very formal process, and we need to present a design that, and in order for them to fully answer our questions. So for them to fully consider municipal own use generation and hybrid, we expect that we need to do the design in this way. So.
I think Mr. Hiltz just wants to supplement.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Muted.
I've got my thing. Sorry, I hit my my one button there. Should know that by now. Thank you, Your Worship, and to members of council. I thought I'd ask Regan to talk a little bit about the difference between the feasibility, talk a little bit about the financial analysis, talking about a little bit about detailed design, because each one of them is kind of unique upon themselves, and I just want to bring clarity to that.
Okay, go. Regan, do you want to talk about that now? Actually, that'd probably be good now. Might clarify some of the
Sure.
questions and go forward.
Well, so the financial analysis. So ATCO is only going to be providing us the solar farm options as part of their analysis. That's the scope that's within their scope. The additional options that we're planning to provide, so whether it's urban development of the site, be it residential, commercial, or industrial, we're going to have to develop those options internally. There are some iterations on the commercial solar farm. That's a facility that could be shared with partners. The municipal own use generation portion, whether it's 100% MOUG or whether it's even the hybrid, the municipal own use generation portion cannot be shared with other parties. It has to be 100% owned by a municipality, and it has to be within that the municipal boundary. So the legislation is very specific. So we plan to present all of those options as part of the financial analysis. But we need a design going forward to get us the answers to feed into that financial analysis. So does that fully answer what you were asking, Carrie? Is there?
A better question would be, does that answer kind of provide council a little bit more clarity into that?
Yeah, no, and I guess it speaks to one of my questions, and I thought it got answered in the presentation, because some of the limitations that would be tied to a commercial solar farm, that would be that it has to be outside of St. Albert's control, but that would basically present an opportunity for a partner, correct?
That is correct. Of the solar farm options, the commercial solar farm option is the only one. Well, the hybrid, the commercial solar farm portion of the hybrid could also be shared. So that would be another iteration. But those are iterations on the commercial solar farm.
Okay.
No, I just want one question.
Yeah, because that was what you and I were talking about. So the commercial could be, we lease the land and let somebody else run it, or we partner with somebody, whether it's 50-50 or 60-40, and we invest to that proportion and share revenue in that proportion. So that's part of that's the commercial.
I would agree, Your Worship.
Sorry, just making sure all options are public and that we understand. Keep going.
Yeah, the last question then is so just to confirm, regardless of which option council approves today, we are not locked in to any decision right now. There's still several gates that are available to council to walk away. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. All right, Councillor Killick and then Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge the background material that was provided by Mr. Hiltz. Found it very helpful, from previous years of council's decisions. So it gave me some good background. I'd just like to acknowledge that. In terms of a question, does the Fowler Way alignment give a nice physical separation between what could be phase 3 as used by the municipal own use generation as a full physical separation with its own inverter and connection over to Fortis?
Through the chair to Councillor Killick, it does, yes. We've got 2 arrays to the north of Fowler and 1 array to the south of Fowler.
And does the array south, I still call it number 3, I think, as that's the way it was labeled, in its current configuration, is it below the 5 megawatts that gets us into all this complexity with other regulations with the Alberta Energy Corp, et cetera?
I think it's close, so it would not take much to get it under, I believe, if that answers the question. We could make modifications if we needed to get us under that 5 megawatt size. So.
Thank you. And under that 5 megawatt size, then how much power would that produce? We would still be well within our limits of own use based on the numbers that you had just showed us in terms of the arenas and street lights, et cetera?
So we expect it would be roughly 1/3. So it would be about 7,000 megawatt hours per year, which we expect we can absorb hour for hour at our municipal facilities.
And could you clarify for me the way they measure that? I wasn't clear in terms of the peak is measured during the best case day in the summer, or not measuring it at the winter, or when does that peak?
So the peak is likely in the summer months, and I would guess at noon during a summer month. That's going to be the challenge. We need to fully absorb that peak generation at our facilities in the summer months. So, and that's going to be the challenge. That's an exercise that we're going to have to go through. We've contacted Fortis, and they're going to provide us with hourly metering data at our larger facilities. We have interval meters at our larger sites currently, so they have historical data for the large facilities only. We don't have it at the smaller facilities. And that's the challenge. Is we expect that we're not just going to have to be able to use that consumption, and we have to demonstrate that we're using that consumption. And we don't want to put hourly meters at all of our sites because there's going to be a cost associated with that. So we're looking to do it using the existing hourly meters at our large facilities. And we're expecting that we'll be able to fully demonstrate that those large facilities are consuming all of the electricity that would be generated at a facility of this size. But we need some additional analysis, and we need some additional data that we expect will be provided by Fortis on that.
Okay, but we feel like we're generally close in being able to.
We do, and we expect there will be some additional analysis though, and we need that additional data from Fortis. But I just wanted, I guess, some confirmation from council that this is a path that we want to fully explore, right? Because we can stick with the commercial solar farm and have that as the only option. And that was the charter, but administration just wants to look at these additional options and wants to fully explore them so that we can provide the full picture in July. So.
Yeah. In terms of the power that would be generated, do we know how much we pay, I assume, financially, when we buy power? So we would have that as at least a baseline to say in our financial analysis, today we're paying for, $100,000 a month or whatever it is. So we would have that data. You presented it to us in megawatts, I think, but we could translate that very simply into a budget dollar to help us understand the financial savings. Is that fair?
Yes, yes, we can definitely show both, what the consumption is in kilowatt hours or megawatt hours and what that translates to in terms of cost. And there's going to be the energy cost, and there may be an impact on the D&T component, so that the charges that we pay Fortis as well, likely less so. It's more the energy cost that we'd obviously be offsetting. So
the one that has come forward to me personally, and a lot of Facebook chat about power bills going up for residential, and when you look at the bill there, you have a cost for the power generated, and then there's the two other big costs that are transmission and distribution. If we were to pursue either of these options, including the option 2 municipal owned, do we get away from paying those distribution costs, or are they over and above what we would pay in any case?
we expect that there might be a slight reduction in the distribution and transmission costs, but not a lot. The challenge is because our winter production is lower than our summer production, and our nighttime production is zero. So in the middle of winter, we still need to get our electricity to the facilities, and at night, and those D&T charges are based on the average of the full year previous, right? So they're based on your peak usage in the previous year. So unless we're able to dampen our peak usage at those facilities, it's not going to have a big impact on the D&T charges. It'll offset the energy charges or the electricity charges, but less so the D&T charges. We'll have to do some analysis, but we expect that it would be a minor change, if any. So,
do we pay those for our solar system on service, for example, where you'd mentioned that? Do we pay those charges as well, even though the solar panels are directly on the building that uses the power?
We still pay the D&T charges on those facilities. Our electricity is only partially offset by the rooftop solar at all three of our facilities. So,
okay, so we would still be connected to the grid at all time in any case for any other power that couldn't be generated by our own solar farm.
That is correct.
Okay. Is there there were some concern, and this option 2 was in the ATCO report, so I appreciate it being in the backgrounder as well and discussing it here. So it's been a subject that's been under discussion for a while. Were some of the negative points, I guess, about it, have they subsequently changed for site location, taking into account Fowler Way, for example, doing the connection over to Fortis? Has any of those things changed recently?
The change incorporating Fowler was a change between the phase 1 report and the phase 2 report. So I think the majority of the concerns that we were hearing from residents is concerns about the potential costs and whether the cost would exceed the revenue for the facility. And that's part of that financial analysis, right? Our initial financial analysis was that no, we've got the revenue exceeds the cost overall over the life of the project. That's what we'll be looking to show in July. So now that we've got more detailed information, a more detailed design, and we'll have better cost information for those interconnection fees. Those are a substantial cost for the project, those interconnection fees. with that information, we'll be able to have a better picture
This
on the costs and the revenue side.
build on that interconnection fee. With the location of the inverters all being very close to the Fortis substation, which is optimal location, the interconnection fee, it came up in one of our other discussions where building the underground power to your house at 200 amp, but not spending the other money to upgrade your panel. The $200,000, could that be minimized by building partially the real hard to do parts and only connecting the inverters up if we were to build phase 2 and phase 3? It's come up as a big cost, but I wondered if there was a way to minimize those costs, either through phasing it in or doing some of the heavy construction up front, but not the actual connectivity if we build it in phases.
So our understanding is the 200,000 is just the application fees. There actually isn't any physical infrastructure that goes along with that. We expect that the interconnection fee, which is $800,000, will cover the upgrades that are needed at Fortis's site in order to accommodate the solar farm interconnection. Ironically, we expect that if we were to phase it, they would have to separate it as two different upgrade projects. So if we went ahead with, say, 1/3 of the project, they would have an $800,000 upgrade for that 1/3 of the project. And then if we were to come along 5 years later and say, now we've got another solar farm that we're going to tie in, we expect that Fortis would charge us an additional $800,000. What we're hoping is that if we come forward with the two at the same time, the 2/3 commercial solar farm and the 1/3 municipal own use generation, that it'll only be an $800,000 interconnection fee. And they'll view them as two different metered solar farms, but one interconnection. But we need to, I guess, discuss that with Fortis, and to do that, we need to make a formal application. So,
okay, and if we were to proceed with the smaller solar farm, does it have the municipal one? It seems to me that is a more straightforward process overall. Engineering design, would it speed up our even buying fewer panels so that we could procure them faster? Is there any other, shall we say, drawbacks to not, like, I'm looking at it as a much simplified process to get to phase 3 costing, or then to do the work internally and with ATCO to come up with a much simpler solution, show us that we've got a track record, that we can do this. We now would have full data on terms of how much power could be produced. Are there any other advantages that we haven't discussed that could come forward as going through the MOUG? Got to get a better name than that.
Moog.
Moog. Or Moog power plant.
So we do expect that the size, if we can get it under that 5 megawatts, there is a slightly different process with AUC. So we expect a smoother process with AUC to get that approval process. But if we come around and add, say, 10 megawatts 5 years later, we're going to be having to go to AUC twice, right? So with the smaller solar farm, and then again with the larger solar farm. So we end up with, ironically, you end up with additional costs if you do split it into phases. We expect municipal own use generation will have less administration costs because we can actually deal with our retailer to take care of assigning that electricity consumption to our facilities, right? And we can task whoever we choose to be our retailer. We can tell them, listen, we've got this many megawatt hours of production, and we need you to factor that into, and we can get them to take care of the administration side of it, and get them to do the analysis and the true up to make sure that they're incorporating that generation into our consumption. So, whereas if we go with commercial, we're selling to the grid, and we have to deal with that administration of dealing with the power pool ourselves. So, we do expect that the administration will be less. The challenge with the hybrid is we're doing both. So we'd have to come up with the compliance plan for municipal own use generation. So from an administration perspective, long term, the hybrid is actually the worst because we're dealing with two different ways to deal with it. We'd have to deal with the municipal own use generation, as well as it'd probably take just as much administration to deal with the commercial solar farm, even though we're only selling 2/3 of the electricity that we would under the full scale commercial farm to the power pool or through a PPA.
In terms of the siting of the farm, my understanding is the lower part of Badgerlands where phase 3 is being considered is the cleanest part of the land. And if we go into the other north part, that's where the salt contamination from the snow field is, and some contamination maybe from our other storage. So location 3 is actually the optimal, cleanest location to start.
That is correct. And if we decided to go with municipal own use generation, that would be an additional discussion, whether we would want to put that on the most contaminated site, which is the northern portion of the site. And we expect that would, but there would be changes to go from the hybrid to the municipal own use generation. And that would be part of that discussion, is which 1/3 of the site would be the municipal own use generation. We've had some discussions internally, and we've had discussions with ATCO. ATCO is recommending that right now go with the southern array as the municipal own use generation, and we can look to change that. If we end up landing on municipal own use generation, then we could look to shift it to the northern array for the municipal own use generation. So
The ATCO study also, I think, said they did propose this, and they said that it would be optimal to run it for 2 years to gather real live data. Is that still the current view? The time schedule has shifted significantly as we've gone through different iterations. So is it 2-year?
Sorry, was that in the phase 1 study or in the phase 2 study?
I think it was in the phase 2 study where they still had a reference. I shouldn't say recommendation. They still had a reference saying the MOG, MOUG, would run for 2 years to gather real data and financial information.
I'd have to take that away. I'd have to go back and find that. The phase 2 report recommended building everything all at once. They didn't recommend building it in phases, which was contemplated in the earlier study because of the cost. And it actually isn't the construction cost. Solar farms are quite scalable. It's that interconnection fee, right? If you break it in, that what we were originally contemplating was actually 3 phases of construction. So constructing the arrays one at a time. And there was a couple of reasons why ATCO recommended not doing that. And it's because the big one was the interconnection fees, right? Fortis would charge us for 3 separate interconnections in that. The other thing is we could end up with different technologies because the technologies are changing so quickly with solar. We could end up with slightly different panels. So that could increase our administration and O&M costs. But we could be dealing with different inverters and different panels and slightly different configurations. And so we'd end up with 3 separate solar farms, and each of them are a little bit different, which means we could have different suppliers and different sourcing. So for ease of administration long term, as well as to reduce the capital costs up front, they recommended building the solar farm in 1 phase. So
would that not already be kind of baked into the cake in terms of we've got a solar farm on service with panels that were purchased 2 years ago and inverters, and whatever we do here, it's going to be different in any case. So we've got to be set up to manage that type of situation.
To some extent, yes. But the scale of the facility that we're dealing with here is a much larger scale than our current rooftop solar, right?
Are there other, I know it's come up as potential negatives, but is there possible positives to doing it in phases? Like when we buy trucks, we don't buy them all at the same time. We buy them in rotation so that the, 1/3 of the trucks gets old and we replace it on a rotating basis. We do the maintenance at a different time. That's an advantage in procurement, to do it in phases versus buying it all at once and it all expires at once. So is a phased approach actually potentially have some advantages like that? And even if we bought panels 2-3 years from now, to your point, they may be better quality than the ones we buy today. Could we look at it that way as well, as an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage?
To some extent, you could make a case, but I think those interconnection fees, that $800,000 with each phase, dwarfs any potential advantages that you might have, right? The other thing to consider is the risk element too, and I know that's something. This is a big investment all at once, and you could by staggering the construction, you could offset some of that risk. But you've also got to think of the long term. We'll likely decommission this facility all at once, right? So if we build it in 3 phases, then we'd be looking to decommission it in 3 phases. So we're going to have some costs on the other side of this solar farm as well if we build it in the 3 phases. So.
Councillor Hill, there's a couple other councillors that are waiting to ask
Okay,
questions. Can I let them come in?
I'll
and
come back
to you?
if I have some
Yeah,
questions,
sure.
but thank you very much for your answers. I really appreciate it.
Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Romansky.
Thank you. Hey, Regan, how you doing?
Hello.
Hi. This has been a very refreshing conversation that we've been having today. A couple of things. So with the proposal, are we looking at additional cost, or is it all going to be done in-house still?
Through the chair to Councillor Hughes, right now we're not looking at additional costs and that's the reason that we were looking at just one design, because if we were going to do 3 designs, we would have additional costs. So we're trying to choose one design that'll get us all the answers and information that we need. But we don't want to do 3 designs and make 3 separate applications to Fortis, because we expect that's going to have obviously additional design costs and additional application costs. So.
Got it. Okay, so you also mentioned about how, well, we've got cost increases to the solar panels right now, and also we are going to be looking at least 1% higher on interest rates, just depending on what we had before. Have we done any back of the napkin numbers on whether or not this is even remotely viable? Because before it was 2.6% interest rate. And then when I asked what would be the cost increase if it was a 1% increase, and basically at that time when it was going to be fully commercial, not including all the expenses that you've now listed recently, it was a $2.4 million expenses with a $2.4 million revenue, which basically means we'd make nothing. So have we updated those numbers to even look to see if this is even worth continuing to pursue?
We haven't in detail. ATCO has provided an update, and they're still showing financial viability, but we haven't done our own cost benefit analysis internally. We're waiting until we get some better numbers on everything across the board.
Today,
So.
Councillor Hughes, is not to get those financials and whether we're going to build or not, if it's sustainable, if it's not, it's going to make. That's not what we're asking today. Regan needs to know of what options so he can go and do the work that you just asked about.
Yeah,
So-
no, I was just trying to figure out if it's even worth continuing to go down this road at all. Because if it's going to show it's going to be a negative on the back of the napkin, the odds are that we're just wasting time. So that's why I was asking. So you haven't yet done that. We'll be doing that in the future. So the next steps, you said we're going to go to for approval, AUC, I believe, or ATCO, one of them, to do the next steps for the application. So if we do the next, what I'm wondering is we're saying we're not deciding. I understand this. But we are now also submitting an application to do something. How much are we in the glue to actually do that we're proposing without actually having the decision of whether or not it's a good idea? So yeah, go ahead.
So it's not a single application, and the Fortis applications will be first, and then the AUC will come later. But there's stages to it. Just like the way we've staged the project, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that actually aligns with the stages of the Fortis applications. So they expect that you're only going to have a 30% design to start with, and you're going to have a 60% design, and then they expect that there's going to be some iterations along the way. If there's a substantial change, they may tell us that we need to restart our application. So there may be additional costs if we were to switch over to the municipal own use generation. They might have us restart the application process. We don't expect that's the case with the hybrid, but it's possible. We expect it would be the case if it was the other way around. If we started with municipal own use generation and then we tried to make the solar farm larger, we expect that we'd probably have to go back to the beginning and start over with our application process with Fortis. So
the cost to Fortis, that's not the full 800,000, is it? Or is it a lesser?
It's the 200,000 right now, and it's broken down. It's like 5,000 for the first application, and then I think it's 20,000, and then like the applications start to get more expensive as you get into the more detailed designs that you're presenting as part of the application. So
you're looking at bringing this back to us in July, was that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and I know you had it on the screen, but I didn't memorize it. So when in July, how far will we be in the application process? How much sunk cost money are we already in for?
So I mean, so the budget that we currently have today,
I guess in the application process.
In the application process, we won't have final approval from Fortis. We'll be, I want to say maybe 60%, 70% of the way through the application process with Fortis. So
are we looking at like 100,000 out of the two? Or how many of the application fees do you think will be in?
It could well be in that order, but I would hesitate to say, I don't know exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just looking at ballparks here.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not here trying to catch anything, Regan. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. Okay, so I guess what happens if you come in July and it looks like neither option is really viable in the end? Is there an opportunity to just put the brakes on everything and say we'll be just withdrawing our application?
That's how we're setting this up. Yes.
Okay, so this next thing was, I know that you said the third is the most complicated, but I'm also looking at it like, I understand all your number ones and twos. I understand all the pros and cons on this, but you did say number one, there's going to be all these additional costs involved between the taxes and the administration fees that we have to actually account for and can't just subsidize. If we do number three, we're going to still have the majority of those costs. Like you're still going to need an accountant and you're still going to need legal, you're still going to need those people to do it, but we will not even have the full generation to compensate for that.
That is correct.
So have we looked at even if that's viable? We haven't looked at even whether or not that's viable at all. Because I'm just thinking if we can't make number one work, how can we show the viability of number three when we have less revenue, but probably similar expenses?
We will have less taxes as well though, right? But yes, that's part of the analysis.
Okay.
But we won't have that provincial and federal tax payment to make with that municipal own use generation portion.
I just feel like if we're doing it that way, it makes it even less likely that we would show a positive number. I mean, I can see the MOU and doing the 1/3. I mean, because you're getting the rebates on retail, that it would make sense that, you know, we can probably show that it would break even on the 5 megawatts or less. But if we're doing it on the 10 megawatts and the other, have we looked at that at all? Like whether or not this is even an option? Now, I understand that you're bringing this forward this way so that we can explore both options and then make a decision going forward. That's the impression I'm getting from you, is that let's put them both forward and then make a decision.
We did a back of envelope and it's still too close to call, right? If one of them was an obvious front runner, then that would be the recommendation for today. You know, keeping in mind that we could have additional design costs down the road, but right now we're not seeing a clear front runner in terms of cost benefit overall for the project, right? Obviously, there's less revenue for the municipal own use generation, but there's less costs as well. So it's a scaled down version of the others, but in terms of rate of returns, they're all tracking very close to the same. So.
Okay, just a couple more questions. I won't take up the whole evening. The Ray Gibbon Drive, you said that you did not account for the realignment of Ray Gibbon Drive because it's a temporary project, but it's supposed to be like 3 decades long. And I believe Ray Gibbon's supposed to be done prior to that. So how do we put those two together and still, not include the costs.
I think you're meaning Fowler Way.
Sorry,
'Cause
you know what I'm, yeah, you got it.
Because Ray Gibbon
Fowler.
drives outside of this. And then there's
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
there's Villeneuve Road as well, right? And
Okay.
we're anticipating that Villeneuve Road, that realignment would not occur within, until this site is developed for urban development. So that would happen when that occurs. So after we decommission the solar farm, if the solar farm goes ahead, after we were to decommission the solar farm, then we would realign Villeneuve to tie into Fowler through this property. Is what we're expecting. Sorry.
So would that delay the realignment of Villeneuve Road? Because we're looking at 2 to 3 decades here before we're planning to decommission it. So my impression was that we were going to do the realignment for Villeneuve Road before that. I know this isn't your area, so it might be another person to answer, but would this delay this? Because I really thought that we were doing it before 3 decades from now.
It could delay this. When we talked transportation, that realignment of Villeneuve Road in this section was expected to happen in conjunction with the urbanization of this property. There is another connection. I think it's at Hogan. Hogan's connecting to Fowler Way as well. So further to the east, there's an additional connection. When the intersection of Fowler and Ray Gibbon is performed, I expect, what I've seen in the transportation master plan is Villeneuve Road will dead end, and the solar farm will actually, it'll lead to the solar farm, and that's all, right? So we'll be the only customer on the end of Villeneuve Road is what I'm seeing in the transportation master plan. But in the discussions that we had with our transportation group, Villeneuve Road at this location will not connect with Fowler until the site is urbanized. So.
Okay, the dead ending of Fowler is brand new news to me, because I thought we were still connecting it and doing a roundabout, and we were for the emergency access to Villeneuve Airport, et cetera. So that's news.
Not the master plans that I've seen. It connects to Fowler through this property in the long term. So. Okay.
I don't know when that came about. The decommissioning costs, are they going to be included in the July numbers? Because I don't believe that they have been in previous numbers, and they can be quite substantial.
They were included. They were included previously, and they will be included in the July numbers as well. There was the decommissioning cost was included. I believe it was 5%. So it was a substantial cost that was included. But I mean, it's time value of money as well. But those decommissioning costs were included.
Okay, and so the further approval, just so we got this clear, because I know that this is just this is basically like asking us to do an exploratory phase to figure out which option to use. The decision about whether we move forward with either option in any capacity or we just kill the project altogether will be occurring in July. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
That's what we're expecting with our current timelines. If ATCO runs into delays, if we run into, there could be delays that push us further out. But the schedule that we're working with right now, we're planning to come back to council in July.
Yeah, well, if you're late, you'll tell us.
And if we run into another little issue like this, there could be something along the way, we might be back before council just to because we wanted to keep you guys aware of the progress that we're making on the project, right? So if there's anything substantial, we considered this substantial enough that we brought it up to executive leadership, and they thought it was appropriate to share with council as well. So.
No, I'm finding these conversations quite refreshing in the past 2 weeks. So this is, I appreciate everything that you and Mr. Hiltz are bringing forward to council on the way it's being brought forward. So I had it and it left my brain. I'm going to let it go, Mayor Heron. If I think of it, I'll come back to you. Okay,
Yeah,
that's it for now.
Romansky been waiting for quite a while, so I'll go ahead, Councilor Romansky, when you're ready.
Thank you to the mayor. Hello, Regan. The questions I have are on the actual environmental impact. So say we took and used the parcel of land, the third of land in the top northern version that's the most contaminated. Have you factored into it the environmental part of the breakdown leakage that you get from solar panels and how they can contaminate groundwater? So if we're to put it in the cleanest area of the 3 parcels and we're going to be contaminating that land and then we have further contaminated land, will that be all in your presentation as well? Because that's very important.
So the foundations for this, I guess, I don't know, I'll do my best to answer it. And I think there's some folks here with environment that can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're wanting through this remediation plan is to determine what the cost would be, and we're looking to a recommendation. We expect that in conjunction with the solar farm, if a solar farm were to go ahead, there could be some cleanup costs, maybe take away some of the superficial layer, because that's where we expect a lot of the salt contamination is likely in the first foot or two, but we need to prove that out through some geotechnical testing. And we're hoping we're going to get better information as a result of that remediation plan, as well as we'll have a better idea of what the costs are. Because I think we had a $15.5 million cost for the remediation. That was an estimate that was done years ago, and it was based on residential use of the site, and it was sort of a worst case scenario. So we need to prove out what those costs are and prove out how much remediation we're looking to do and the timing of the remediation. We're looking to get all of that out of that remediation study. So,
And I saw a thumbs up from Ryan Stovall. So I guess what you said, he agreed with Regan.
So you would clean the lands first to possibly contaminate them again by having the solar panels there. is what you're saying.
Depending on what's contained in that remediation plan, right? We'll look at what the recommendations of that remediation plan are. So.
Okay, and then in the three different levels, you had operational costs were more than 3 times in each section. So if you went to the MOUG, it wasn't just a third of the operational costs of all 3. It would have been higher to do 3 sections. So why would that be?
Sorry, what was
the operational costs I saw were like, I believe 120,000 versus 30,000.
What page is it on, Councilor Bermansky?
I don't know what page it's on. Sorry, I don't have the report in front of me.
This was an ATCO's report?
Yes, and it was more than 3 times of the operational cost. It was actually, 4 times.
For the full-scale facility, sorry?
Yeah,
Correct,
there's
yes.
operational costs in our agenda package. So I think you're confusing us, Councilor Bermansky.
Okay, I'll leave that question for now then. Okay, and the second last question is, it showed the inverters need to be replaced at 15 years. So have you put the cost of that into the projections as well? And because when you're finally seeing return, you're having to replace things already. And if the technology is changing that quick, like you were saying, it wouldn't match having different panels. When you're having to replace, isn't it good to cycle those anyhow if you have to replace them every 15 years?
Again, Councilor Bransky, the financials of A, B, and C options in front of us are not what we're talking about today. So Regan has not put those costs in because that will come in July. Right now,
Okay.
we need to focus our questions on whether we want this commercial or municipally owned.
I just need to know if it will show the costs of replacement in the projections.
Sure. I think part of the presentation today is a bit of education, I think, too, and getting everybody caught up. So yes, in the original analysis that ATCO had done, they had included at 15 years that all of the inverters would be replaced. Now, and you say there could be some positives, yes, to staggering that, but there's also some negatives, right? Because we could do a single procurement and take care of all the inverters at once. If we stagger them by a couple of years, then we're looking at 3 different phases. So it's good and bad. And I would lean towards it's actually worse, right? I would sooner deal with a single procurement to take care of all the inverters all at once, rather than do it in 3 separate phases. But there's pros and cons. So.
Okay, and the decommissioning of the project, that would just be projected because, of course, it should be quite a bit more expensive in the future to get rid of waste, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. I think the cost estimate was 5% in today's dollars. So the original capital costs, we're expecting 5% of those costs. So.
That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Anyone else have any further questions? All right, we're good. So I'm going to go to you, Councillor Killick.
Mayor Hearn, can I just ask one more question really quickly? This one. Yeah. I just, hi Regan. I just want to confirm that in July, the remediation study will be presented to us at the same time. Is that right? So we'll have everything basically in front of us in July?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll have to defer that to Ryan. The remediation study might be earlier. I will include the remediation study. The impacts, the cost impacts will be included in the financial analysis. But if the remediation study is done earlier, it could be presented earlier, but that's going to be up to our environment group. So.
I'll just comment. I have Megan Myers, the manager of environment. She can give us a project status update. But we are planning on track to align with Regan's update in July.
Perfect. I just want to make sure we're going to have everything. So that way we're not pausing or waiting or hoping for something. You don't have it all, just wait till you get it all, I guess. Just want to double check on that. I know the public's very interested in this topic, so we want to make sure that they're assured that when we're getting what, so that there's no questions being asked. Thank you.
Councillor Killick, go ahead.
Thank you. Just last week, we had an update on the realignment of Villeneuve and how it would connect up to Fowler Way. And we were assured that the transportation master plan shows Villeneuve not dead ending at Hogan Road, but it actually shows it kind of arcing north up to Fowler Way. So I think this question was maybe asked once or twice, and it confused me when you gave the answer that it would dead end and wouldn't impact the potential site of Section 3. I just like clarification on that.
I don't know if Mr. Schick. Oh, there's Donnie. Go ahead, Donnie.
Through the chair to Councillor Click, yeah, Mr. Schick couldn't join the meeting today. So if I can shed some light there, what we shared is it will dead end at Ray-Gibbon, not at Hogan. Hogan will still have connection to Fowler, and there's a roundabout that was showed that will connect to Fowler, which then connects to Ray-Gibbon, and then you can travel to Villeneuve Airport through that channel. What Regan has mentioned in this presentation is there's another connection from Villeneuve to Fowler directly, and there's a roundabout that's planned, which will go through our Badger lands. We don't need that connection until such time as an urbanization occurs. So we still have connection to Fowler through Hogan, is what I'm trying to say. Will that clear the confusion there?
Okay, no, that's good. But essentially what I'm hearing, just to make sure I got it right, is the change to Villeneuve would not have that curve going up to Fowler Way would not happen for many years in the future, and it probably wouldn't happen until such times as, shall we say, the solar farm is built and even decommissioned. So we're out to 2045, something like that.
More likely, and the reason behind is there's no demand for that road if a solar farm exists there, right? Until urbanization occurs. So that's the rationale behind it. If any analysis suggests that we need to put that road back in earlier than that, absolutely we need to consider that as part of the solar farm discussion.
Okay, thank you.
In the good old days, Councillor Killick, we used to have placemats at our spots. Wes will remember, and it had the maps of the city. We should get a map of the future transportation master plan in chamber so we can point to it all the time. All right, no more hands up. So do you still want to make your motion as you had proposed amending it, or do you want to go back to what's in our package? Okay, go ahead. Read it in as you would like it. The motion we have in progress is not the one that Councillor Killick sent.
I can read it just off my...
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
So the first part of the motion is that it stays the same, that administration report entitled Solar Farm Update dated February 7th, 2022 be received for information. The second part is that council directs administration to focus on option number 2 discussed in the solar farm update for purposes of detailed design.
Okay, I'm going to split that motion so we can do the for information first. Is that what you were going to do, Councillor Brodhead? Because we don't want to turn down the information if we don't support your amendment. Okay, so why don't we split the motion? I'll accept the received as information piece of it, and I'll let you have opening arguments if you want to speak to that piece of it. Or it's just information. You don't have to.
Just to say, I appreciate the current update the information received builds on the excellent work that was done previously, and it seems to flow together. Appreciate that it addresses 3 options for council's consideration, and the presentation answered a lot of questions. So the information as presented and follow-up questions have been helpful, and recommend we support that.
Perfect. And I see no one else wanting to speak, so I'll call for the vote. Voting. Voting's closed, and that passes unanimously. All right. Councillor Killick, your second piece of your motion is that we focus on option 2. You read it, I'll accept it. So go into your opening arguments. Pardon? You did. Yep. That's okay. It's on your screen, so that council directs administration to focus on option number 2 discussed in the solar farm update for purposes of detailed design. If you want to make an amendment. Okay, thank you for that. All right, go ahead, Councillor Killick.
Thank you. So again, going back to the information that we received and historical information, in reviewing all of that, it seemed to me that option 2, the municipal owned use generation, was a simpler approach. We avoid, number one, it's scaled down in the cost. It's scaled down in the complexity of doing it. It avoids significant admin and legal costs going back and negotiating different agreements with the Public Utilities Board and Alberta Electrical Board. We stay below that 5 megawatt. We may actually open ourselves up to a much easier grant process like we did for the solar panels on the top of Service Place. The land being separated by Fowler Way looked to me to be a very easy solution, or actually supports a solution of building a option number 2 MOG solution. The location of the physical infrastructure, the inverter, the size of the panels generated. We've looked at the numbers, and Regan has confirmed that we could consume all of that power easily from the smaller municipal owned approach. Potentially we could move it to the most polluted land or toxic land. So it just seemed to me there are significant own use benefits, and it's a simpler solution to work through with ATCO. We could get it up and running potentially sooner, and we could start to see real data as well as potentially real financial benefits by building something that essentially offsets our own usage. We've had success in doing that by having solar panels on top of transportation center and service. This is just a slightly larger proposal, but again, simplification, setting the team up for success, allowing us to move forward with real-time information, and actually addressing many of the questions that have been raised by residents in terms of, will this really make money? It eliminates our need to go out and get a PPA agreement to sell power to someone yet to be determined. We become our own customer, and it just seems to me a much simpler approach. So that's why I brought forward the motion to investigate option number 2. It also simplifies admin's time and cost as focusing in on a much simpler option, and recognizing that it could cost us a little bit more later on by adding to it. But in project management history, keeping it simple is the key to success. It's a kind of a version of the KISS analogy. Keep it simple for success. And that's why I brought forward the motion.
Perfect. Thank you. I have Councillor Pakai, Councillor Broadhead, then Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to support this because for all the reasons that were outlined by Councillor Killick's opening comments, we can achieve all of those same things by sticking with recommended option number 3, because we're not making any decision points on any of those. The only thing we're being asked to make a decision on is whether or not we want option 1, option 2, or move towards option 3. And even administration identifies that option 3, although somewhat more complex, will give us better information. And then we can easily step back, and it's always easier to step back and move back into option number 2 once we learn more of the details that not only we were asking in our questions and were provided by administration, but also addresses some of the concerns that were raised in Councillor Killick's opening comments, because those types of decisions will only be informed by best information that we get by fully exploring all of our options, and therefore allowing us to arrive at the best solution. And the best solution may be going back to number 2, which we can do. It may be determining what are other options that we have for going forward, such as involving a partner that can maybe help us deal with some of the hurdles that were identified, or we could look at even whether or not we want to move forward with this, because actually the dollars and cents don't make any sense. And so maybe we move and utilize the land for other needs, which were also being identified. So I just think it's a little premature to identify one particular option, particularly when we have administration's recommendation that we move towards number 3. And once we get the information coming back to us in July, then we can make a more informed decision. I just don't want to narrow us down in our scope just yet when we have potentially a more complete picture arriving at the end of July. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate your perspective, Councillor Killick. Quite honestly, I think you made some great points. I think you're making the debate, though, that we need to have in July. And so what I would like to have in order to make a wholesome decision around the whole solar farm issue is all the information that's available to us. And I think that's what's found in option 3. And recognize that in July, we may in fact want to scale back to option or just the municipal owned utility or generation, MOG or whatever we call it. We may want to step back to that. But I think July is the time for that kind of debate to happen. So appreciate your perspective on this, but I'd kind of like the information. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. I can see where you're coming from, this Councillor Killick, and I'm really not even sure how I'm going to go on this. I might still support you. The only reason why I would go with option 3 is just so that we have all the information, so that we can at least exhaust this conversation and not have it just keep coming back and back. So that's the only reason why I go with number 3, because it looks unlikely that this is going to make more money in option 3 than it will in option 1. It will have less revenue and still the similar costs. If they don't think option 1 will work, I don't think a reduced plan is going to make it either. So option 3 basically involves a lot more risk. And that's just something I don't necessarily think we need to go down to. It allows us, if we do just option 2, to use the land for other purposes and only use the contaminated area and not the full 80 acres, which has a huge value because we're sterilizing a larger portion of land that is not contaminated to do this. So I can see the value in just saying, look, the odds are number 3 is not going to work out, and that really we're going to have to go back to number 2 or do nothing at all, depending on what comes in, even those numbers for the number 2 option. Because I don't know how, if we don't think it'll work on a commercial scale on its own, how it works on a smaller commercial scale. So I can see the rationale between just saying, let's just decrease the workload for staff. The only reason, and I don't know how I'm going to vote, but the only reason why I would consider is just that everything's been put on the table so we can stop pursuing an option that really is unlikely to make us money, especially since the interest rates are changing and the costs have gone up, that it's unlikely it would make money even on the numbers from last year. And moving forward, I think it's even less likely. So at some point you have to just, call a spade a shovel here. I'm not sure that this council will be satisfied until all the numbers are in front of them about the commercial to actually have it come to a close. And so I don't know, I may still support China because I think it makes a lot of sense, but I'm just not sure if we didn't continue the whole thing, if it just would not, there'd just be a horse that just wouldn't die. That's about it. Thanks.
All right, I see no one jumping into the debate circle. Councillor Killick, so I'll let you close.
Thank you. My hope was that by simplifying and taking the simple approach, we would set the team up for a quicker path to success. Using solar generated energy, we're our own customer. We would save those dollars going out the door, paid to EPCOR. We would know for sure that we're going to get a return on our investment. We are generating the power, we're using the power, and we're saving those tax dollars being spent on paying an external power provider. We know that that is very simplistic math, but it makes sense to me that we would pursue that as quickly as possible and get the numbers, get a solar farm built. If our Drawson can do it and it makes sense to them, and they're a much smaller municipality. I know we've talked about that in previous councils as an example. It's working for them. I think this plan could work for us. It would demonstrate real numbers, real dollar values, real dollar saving. It would be a less expensive path forward, one third the cost roughly, and we could grow it as required into a commercial, potentially commercial, once we see that. But this would demonstrate whether at its most simplistic, straightforward approach, that solar energy works and can be either profitable or at least break even, and maybe a little bit profitable for our municipality. So my approach is that we do this. We don't do the death by 1,000 cuts, make a project so complex, whether it's option 1 or option 3, that we get into paralysis analysis by paralysis scenario. We get so complex that we don't move forward. We have an opportunity to focus the team, look at a simplified solution, actually get something built, generating solar electricity that we use, and saving residents tax dollars instead of paying them out. Buying power, we can generate our own. From that perspective, I think that's a first critical step. We actually get something going physically sooner than later. And once we see that, we can actually start to build on it and look at the other pieces and see if those other steps might make any sense or not. My strong belief is we should get going on something with real numbers, and that's why I brought option 2 forward for council's consideration and to provide guidance to administration.
All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed and that motion failed by majority with Councillor Bermansky, Hughes, and Killick in favor. All right, Councillor Broadhead, I believe you indicated you would do another motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to bring forward the administration's recommendation.
Go ahead whenever you're ready. Yep.
Okay. I move that council approves administration's choice to focus on option 3 discussed in the solar farm update for purposes of detailed design.
Perfect. Let you go into opening comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's before us here today is around designing a solar farm that will give us all the information that we need as a council to actually make an informed decision going forward. Actually, I loved your debate, Councillor Killick, going forward. I think there's merits to that, and I'm not sure what's going to happen when we see it all together come July. I just think that at this point in time and where we're going as a community and as a council, we need to hear all of the information so that we can make an informed decision. I think a half a decision to the point that Councillor Hughes made earlier, if we don't answer those questions, they'll always be hanging out there. And whether they're right or whether they're wrong, there will always be open for debate. And I think if we get the whole slate of information that's before us that takes in the account of all of the things that the administration had put forward today, I think that we'll be able to land on a course of action that satisfies at least most of us.
Perfect. Anyone else on debate? I'll support you, Councillor Broadhead, and I wanted to see the commercial part remain, mostly to address what Councillor Mackay had talked about and I mentioned earlier is the opportunity. And Regan, it would be nice if we could even have an expression of interest, if it's even out there yet, to have somebody partner with us. You know, if you've got somebody like ACO or NMAX or somebody who's in the business willing to share in the risk and the revenue of this project, it kind of makes it seem more worthwhile. If we can't find anyone, then maybe it's not worthwhile. So I'd like to see that presented in July, but that's only available if you do the commercial piece of it. So that's always been something I've been thinking about as an option for our council. So that's all I have. Anything to close, Councillor Broadhead? Oh, Councillor Hughes, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, good. I'm hanging up way up high. Start climbing. Yeah, I'm going to support this because I just feel like unless we get that information, we're not going to have this come to a close, and it will be a what if situation, as you said, Councillor Broadhead. I'm skeptical about whether the commercial is viable, but willing to see those numbers. I think that the conversations that we've been having in recent weeks have been different than what I've had in the past, and I really have appreciated the level of disclosure. And so I feel more confident about what's going to be brought forward by Regan and Mr. Hills and the team to help us make a decision. And I'm hoping like that I'm expecting that if it is not showing it's viable, that it will just flat out say this is the numbers and it's not viable. If it is, show us the numbers and how, and we'll defend it and make that decision going forward. So that's what I'm expecting to see, so that way we can get it. And I'm glad that everything is going to be coming to a head, at least to get that information. So it's been a refreshing the past couple months to have these discussions about these different projects. And I am optimistic that we'll have enough data that will make a clear decision about what's best for St. Albert and how the best use is for this land going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yeah, I too agree that this last little bit has been very helpful. The interesting thing as well is that additional information that's going to come in July is what the other options are for using the land. Urban residential, urban commercial, urban industrial. And those are considerations that we need to put up against the solar farm and consider the whole thing. It may in fact be that there are other options that will pay more back to the city. However, we've gone down this road because We're an environmentally conscious community, and we want to demonstrate that at the same time as reaping financial rewards for our community. So we'll see. And in July, I'm really looking forward to the information and to the debate that occurs. It'll be interesting. Thank you.
All right, call for the vote. Voting is closed and that motion passes by majority with Councillor Bermansky and Councillor Kulik opposed. All right. Then we need a break. It's 3:30. We're good. Let's do this. Let's do the collaborative economic development and then we'll see where we're at. So Mr. Hiltz, you doing this one? Or is Chris?
No, I'm doing this one. Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
Okay. Worship, members of council. So today I'm going to provide a very high-level brief update on the Collaborative Economic Development Initiative, or CED, which was first introduced to council in the fall of 2020. Prior to the presentation, I'd like to recognize Christine Anderson with the City of St. Albert and Ian Gallagher with the City of Edmonton for all their great heavy lifting that they've done throughout this project and also putting the presentation together today. So I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. So CED is a new approach to economic development that's been jointly developed by William municipalities. And right now we have a partnership of 13 within the region have signed on to the MOU. And all 13 municipalities are also getting this presentation. And we're probably in the middle of those presentations right now. The aim of a CED is to improve the cost competitiveness and attracting non-residential investment to the region, coordinate business processes and focused areas, and incentivize partners to work together and reduce inter-municipal competition. And that's probably one of the biggest parts of this is to really work towards, things are getting much more expensive. And we do need to look at these creative, innovative ways to be able to bring some of these businesses into the region. Today's presentation will provide an overview of the project, an outline of the Memorandum of Understanding between the partners, a look at the work completed so far, and a brief description of what's next in the initiative. So this is a listing of the 13 municipalities within the region that have signed on to the MOU. So when we're looking at the CED overview, it's time for us to think big. There's a major opportunity for the Edmonton metropolitan region to do something great, to come together and attract more foreign direct investment to build a better future together within the region. So within the region right now, we have economic development and at the local level, and it contributes to the region's economic diversity and resilience by attracting new businesses and jobs. We also have regional economic development that can reduce intermunicipal competition, boost competitiveness, attract investment, and generate more direct revenue for local governments. CED is a roadmap towards achieving these regional goals and benefits. So what I really like about from the CED perspective is we can build off of the economic developments, but it also provides us this opportunity to look at a lot of our other projects and successes moving forward as well. So this new innovative initiative will strengthen existing regional collaborations and complement the important work already being done in the region to attract and support investment. So the initiative will develop some tailoring to meet business investment needs, attract non-residential growth and investment opportunities. A framework to jointly develop shovel-ready lands and incentivize businesses to locate there by providing business appropriate infrastructure, utilities, and service levels, and reducing red tape and costs to businesses by streamlining service delivery and leveraging municipal strengths. And finally, one of the key components of WELL is to receive direct benefit proportional to the level of investment. So when we're bringing in a $30 million project and St. Albert invests $6 million, we would see return on investment proportional to that investment in the future. So we're looking at some of the key components or value proposition for this. Some of the key benefits of CED is to create an opportunity to generate revenue from non-residential growth. This is a way of us moving away from residential growth and more into the industrial area or commercial area for our tax split. It helps to attract large impact investment at lower individual costs. It will create more competitive offerings across the region. It will encourage responsible growth by being aligned to our statutory and non-statutory plans, such as the EMRB growth plan. And it will help reduce intermunicipal competition. In short, partnering in this way allows a region to better align in order to attract new kinds of business. If you look on the right side of the screen, we have from Edmonton Region, Edmonton Global's position, where they're basically to support the investment attractions. We have our municipal and sub-regional EDOs and entities, coordinate and streamline to enhance investment readiness. And Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board aligns with the regional growth plan and land use. So we're looking at the conceptual framework. Together, the partners will develop a series of tools and policies to attract additional non-resident business investment, identify investment locations throughout the region, work with partners to attract businesses to these locations, share the costs associated with getting identified lands ready for the business investment, share in the direct benefits from the new business investments, such as property tax revenues. So moving through into the Memorandum of Understanding. So on April 12th, 2021, 13 municipalities signed on to the MOU. The MOU is a non-binding agreement. Basically, a MOU is to keep the conversation moving forward. It's agreed, so they agreed on the scope of framework to move forward. And it's basically that demonstrates commitment to work together. It sets a broad guidance in terms of reference for multi-partner approaches. So each municipality would mutually benefit from the economic framework. It's not legally binding, and land development and incentive costs are outside of the scope of the MOU and would be for future council decisions. So what basically says that any future investment by council would require to come back to council for that decision. The framework is being developed so that non-municipal partners can participate and their input will be essential. So we also are reaching out to our First Nations neighbors as well, so they can be part of that benefit through the CED. We're looking at our 6 guiding principles. We're looking at to share the revenue proportionate to investment, to be prepared to invest in property outside the municipal boundaries, to focus on attraction expansion, to build upon regional agreements surrounding economic development, and for example, Edmonton Global's key sectors. That all policies and processes in the focus areas will be analyzed and optimized whenever possible. Participation is voluntary. So this is coming from both the mayors and the CEO's table, who signed the MOU to commit to the framework. So CED project update. On this slide, there's 4 levels of lenses being applied to the project. We have our Liaison Committee at the bottom, and that's coming from our 13 partner municipalities They're providing strategic guidance. And this is probably mainly your economic development officers, financial officers who work in these municipalities. And they're providing a lot of guidance to the working group. And the working group is comprised of 6 partner municipalities, and they're responsible for the development of project deliverables. So that's the work that our staff is currently working on. Is Christine Anderson is part of that group. Part of the liaison committee is Mike Erickson from Economic Development. Steering committee is comprised of 13 partner CEOs. They provide strategic advice and approve project deliverables. St. Albert chairs this committee. And we also have the oversight committee, and that's all 13 mayors. And our worship, Mayor Herron, is the chair of that committee. And they're really there to provide that strategic direction and political guidance moving through the process. Looking at our project overview, so we've completed to date phase 1 and 2. We have the Memorandum of Understanding, the communications plan, investment attraction, best practices, review and summary, cost and revenue sharing models, investment attraction, incentive feasibility analysis, and recommendations. And that's where we've got to by the end of December 31st of 2021. As we move into phase 3 right now, we're looking at detailed site analysis and selection, process improvement analysis, incentive framework development, and validation of key model assumptions. And then we'll be moving in through to phase 4, and hopefully at that point we'll be able to have some projects to be able to work through to see what to bring them to fruition. And phase 4 again is that municipal process improvement recommendations, financial modeling, implementation plan, and project closure. So at this point, I'd like to open up to any questions, and I've got Christine Anderson on the call as well, so she'll be able to jump in and be able to provide some insight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hiltz. Would you call this more of a continuation of our orientation? Because nothing really has changed, since the election, really? No.
No, basically what's probably changed the most is with the working group.
Okay.
They're starting to work on phase 3. And getting into that due diligence around those detailed assumptions and analysis that we do need to have to be able to decide where's that cutoff. So, for example, would a 30 million, is the line in the sand a $30 million investment on a project to get a benefit back, or would something at $6 million be something that we'd be able to see some benefit back? So that's the work that's happening in the background right now. But Christine, please feel free to jump in at any time.
Nothing to add, Christine? Because I see Councillor Broadhead has a question. So go ahead, Wes, and then jump in. Seriously, anytime.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I remember when this came forward, I thought there was promise for the region. Glad to hear the update. I guess my question is when do we get to see the proposals on these things? So phase 3, we start to see how this all starts to work out, how we can conceptualize this working in practical terms.
Yes,
Once
thank
we
you.
have go ahead, Christine, then I'll jump in.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Broadhead. Yeah, a lot of work actually has been going on behind the scenes, and we're bringing forward to the steering committee here in February the proposed criteria for the focus areas that we've been working on. In addition to that, there's been substantial work that's been done on the financial model that'll also be brought forward, as well as the incentive framework. So looking at both the financial and non-financial incentives. And then of course, the next oversight committee meeting will bring the mayors together for their review of all of this in March. So soon there will be more information available to you all.
Just further to your question, Councillor Broadhead, is that this is going to take courageous leadership on behalf of the municipalities to invest money into something that's not in their area or not within their boundaries, and to really look at that long-term incentive identification and benefit. And around the table, there's still that apprehension And once we get that project and we get that first project moving forward, we can show that benefit, then I think the doors will swing wide open.
Yeah, looking forward to where this goes, recognizing there's many gates yet to be opened and closed, or however it goes forward, but some potential for sure. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a question. Just want to make get some sort of assurances that this is actually building on cooperation with EMRB and shared investment for shared benefit and or Edmonton Global, and that there's a lot of connectivity so that I mean, that's the only kind of concern I have is that there's just too many maybe initiatives out there, and I just want some assurances that they're all talking to each other and there's actually is collaboration.
I'll let Christine start with that one. If I need to jump in, I will.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So through the chair to Councillor Mackay, yes, absolutely. You know, SED was always created as a tool to leverage the existing economic development that was happening within the region and to address any gaps that was there. And we're working very closely with Edmonton Global. And as the working group, we meet on a pretty regular basis with Edmonton Global. We just had a meeting this past month. So absolutely, it's not an additional level. It's intended to be a tool to facilitate that as opposed to duplicate efforts.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad to hear that assurances. So for an example of something that potentially could benefit our community and we don't have to go into everything, we can kind of take a scan of what's available and determine whether or not we would want to participate. But let's say something, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm reading this incorrectly, but so a project that's going to be developed in the industrial heartland that might have benefit to us, we can choose to participate if the opportunity is there. And then I guess the devil will be in the details coming back to us as to how that, how we actually benefit economically and how that is worked out, like kind of the details of that. Is that, or am I way off base here?
Yeah, that is the detailed work that's happening right now, how that benefit would play out long-term based on the level of investment or the level of commitment from a community and based on the proportional commitment of funds or whatever it's going to be, lands, expertise. But Christine, is there any other thing that you'd like to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think that one of the important pieces is that each of the focus areas will be brought forward as a separate project to be evaluated by council as to whether there is value in participating in that particular investment at that time.
Okay, I'll look forward to it. Look forward to the details, I guess.
Christine, two questions. Mr. Carey talked about this takes courageous leadership, and last summer when we were tossing the hexagon around in our little video, you had 13 mayors very eager to dive into this. But there's new mayors around the table. I know the regional councils are getting a similar presentation to what we just got. I'm wondering if you're getting a sense of that courageous leadership still exists within the region, or are we the first presentation? I don't know where we are in the order. I'm just kind of trying to get your sense.
Thank you, Mayor. We're about in the middle of the pack right now with respect to the presentations that have happened, and the feedback that we've had to date, and we'll have more at the steering committee meeting next week, has been positive. And I think that that's evident in the fact that people are still showing up at the tables. So one of the pieces that we started in December was connecting with regional EDOs from across the region, and we had excellent participation and continue to have excellent participation. So I would say the fact that all 13 municipalities continue to engage in this project a year after the fact is really positive at this point.
Good. All right, and phase 3 talks about site selection. So I guess I'm going to ask, is there any St. Albert sites that are being entertained? And there's one in particular that it's going to be very expensive for just our municipality alone to bring online, but with partners, we could have it done faster. if we're willing to share. So is that going to be presented as an option? Like maybe Carrie should answer this one. Big question.
It will be thrown on the, it will be thrown on the table
Okay.
to be looked at from, to put it through the model to see what type of benefit there is. I'll let you speak to the project location if you want to.
Well, it's Lakeview,
Yeah, it's
right?
Lakeview.
You know, it's an enormous amount of money for the city of St. Albert to bring online. But even if we had 2 or 3 partners that were willing to share in that,
Yeah.
the question would be, would our council be willing to share in the tax revenue generated? Because my thinking is if we don't do it, we have no tax revenue, or we can get a share of it for a certain amount of time, whether, and those kind of details, I don't know if we've hammered out how long we would share revenue and that kind of stuff, but
And that's.
I hope that, I think Lakeview is a perfect way to demonstrate the value of CED. I've always thought that. So I always thought Villeneuve Airport would be another good example. They've gone down their own path, but there's probably other examples in the region that I'm not aware of, but I'll be putting St. Albert's interest quite in the front. So that's all. Anything else? Seeing no one at home, anyone want to make a motion to receive this as information? I think that's what it is, right? Councillor Jolly, go ahead. That's all good. Yeah.
That the administrative report titled Collaborative Economic Development Update be received as information.
All right, any comments?
I feel like you have all the comments, Mary. I appreciate the update. I think as you commented, this is kind of the same conversation that we've been having for a few months and no substantive updates as far as I know. So I appreciate having the opportunity to see it again.
Sure. I will let you all know. Yeah, the mayors are meeting in sometime in March, and I'll give you guys a little check back on what I felt the tone of the room was when I hear it. Anything further, Councillor Jolly? All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed, and that's unanimous. All right, the next thing was on consent, which was a first reading of the land use bylaw, essentially surrounding some of the amendments we need to make because of annexation. So that public hearing is scheduled for February 22nd. And then we have no emergent items. Any information request, notice of motion, or announcements from a member of council? Seeing nothing popping up, we're going to move on. Pardon? Do you have something, Mike? Okay, go ahead.
It's a information request around, do we have any proactive policies, procedures in place to protect the 3 wild moose that have been roaming around St. Albert for the last 2 months? I've noticed they've moved from Grandin to Forest Lawn over. They're moving around the city. Unfortunately, I'm seeing Facebook posts where people are baiting them with apples in their backyards so they can get selfies. And there's lots of videos being posted online of this mother moose and 2 babies walking around. So I'd just like to know if there's anything that, based on bad experience in the past, that we have in place as a policies or procedures of how to protect these and keep them safe from people and traffic. I'd just love to know if we have something that we can do rather than ending up in a bad situation. I know it's a delicate subject.
Sure,
but
yeah. I think there's some in Oakmont too. There's always moose in front of my house.
Yep.
But I don't know if Megan is still around. I don't see her there. I could tell you probably no, but I'll let the staff do a more formal IR on that one. But I have at least no policies. I think there's probably some internal procedures that they coordinate with Alberta Fish and Wildlife. But yeah. So I'll take that as a formal IR, unless you can answer quickly, Mr. Hiltz.
No, I think a formal IR would be great because probably have to involve municipal enforcement and every
Okay.
environment, each of the departments there.
Okay, would you like Mr. Killick, Councillor Killick, to write that out, or do you have it accurately captured?
I would think we have it accurately captured.
Okay, you're good to go. All right, anyone else with an IR notice motion? Okay, moving on. We had no registered presentations again for after our meeting, so we're going to go into camera to discuss. We'll do the corporate business plan first. So can I have a motion to go in camera for whatever FOIP that is? That's
21, Mayor.
51C. Do you want to make the motion, Councillor Hughes?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
That we move in camera, discuss the matter, pursuant to section 21 of FOIP.
All right, call for the vote.
Oh, Mayor, were we doing point 2 instead of point 1 first? I think I screwed up.
12.2, which is still section 25.
I said 21. 25, 21, C, 1, C, 2, and 3. Just so
Yeah.
we have it right on the record, that's all. Okay,
All
sorry.
right, thank you for that. Call for the vote. Voting's closed and that motion passes unanimously. All right, are we staying in here? Okay. All right. And FYI, Council, we had a quick conversation this morning. Ledge is going to start staying in camera with us from now on. Found out that that's the norm in most municipalities. So, plus, then we don't have to worry about clearing the room. Ledge can do the breakout rooms for me. I don't have to do it. And keep minutes. Well, or keep the motions recorded. 5-minute break before we actually start this conversation, so everybody can have a bio break.
of opportunities in alignment with council strategic priority number 4, infrastructure investment.
All right, accept that motion. Anything you want to comment on?
No, I think this is a potentially exciting opportunity for the city.
Perfect. Anyone else? Anyone at home? Seeing none, call for the vote. Voting's closed and that passes unanimously. Okay, so we are now on to 12.1, which is a back in camera for the Edmonton Metro Region Board briefing. So I need a motion to go back in. Councillor Hughes, you want to do it with the right VoIP now?
Yeah, go back in camera under section 21 of FOIP.
Thank you. Call for the vote. Who are we waiting for? Shelby? There we go. I'm going to guess that's unanimous. All right. Okay, we're back in camera. So do we need to go back in our breakout room? Okay. Yeah, we won't be back in public again. So